This special presentation was produced in high definition by WEDU, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota.
Coming up next, Jim Norman, whose previous time in office ended when it was revealed his wife received a vacation house from one of his political donors, is trying to make a political comeback. Did the governor's office doctor a report on Planned Parenthood? Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn and the city council are at odds over how to set up a citizens police review panel. And Joe Biden makes a series of speeches in South Florida. Is this a sign that Hillary Clinton is in trouble? Political Insights next on Florida This Week.
From the WEDU studios, this is Florida This Week. And now, moderator Rob Lorai.
Welcome back. This week our panelists are Joe Brown is a columnist for the Tampa Tribune. Brendan McLaughlin is a reporter and anchor for ABC Action News. April Schiff is a political consultant and a Republican. And Barry Edwards is a Democratic strategist and radio commentator and a Democrat. Well, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming over to WEDU. Well, former Hillsborough County Commissioner Jim Norman is trying to make a political comeback. He wants to return to the county commission. This week he filed papers to run for a countywide seat. Norman was dogged by controversy several years ago when it was revealed that his wife had accepted a $435,000 lakefront house in Arkansas from a wealthy businessman who had donated money to Norman's campaigns. Norman did not disclose that his wife owned the property and contended it was his wife's investment and he did not know about it. The publicity surrounding that news led to Norman deciding to withdraw from a run for re-election to a state Senate seat back in 2012. Norman has always denied wrongdoing, and no charges were ever filed against him. Now he's running again, this time for the Republican nomination for a countywide commission seat. One of his political supporters tells the Tampa Bay Times that Norman already has collected $100,000 in contributions for this race. Brendan, a few years ago, your story, the investigative team at your TV station, broke this story.
That's right.
And it centered around a guy named Ralph Hughes, who has since passed away. But could you talk a little bit about Ralph Hughes, the businessman who bought this house for Norman's wife?
Well, he was the developer, and his business, in a broad sense, came before the county commission on a regular basis. Jim Norman was known to be pro-development and against impact fees and things like that would have benefited a developer like Ralph Hughes. It was a close relationship between Hughes and Norman and his wife. The hard-to-swallow part of this has always been Jim Norman's contention that he didn't know that Ralph Hughes gifted his wife the money to buy this $400,000-something house, and that it was completely her deal that he was unaware of. We're married. We know how unlikely that seems in the real world. In any case, Ralph Hughes passed away, and there was some contention between the surviving family members, and Jim Norman, because they felt that money maybe wasn't properly given either. The terms of that are confidential. We may not know exactly how that happened. But I think everybody's sort of scratching their heads and wondering how Jim Norman thinks he can get elected again with that baggage. And that's not the only misadventure, of course, in his history.
Yeah, April, I want to ask you about the Republican primary for this county commission race. Is it going to be a three-person? Because I think 3 announced candidates are in right now. Is it just going to be a 3-person race, or is it going to be more than that?
I think that you're likely to see some more people get into this primary, mostly because Jim Norman is running, and there are people who think that shouldn't happen again.
So this is a problem for the Republicans, too. I mean, the Democrats aren't just kind of, looking at this in glee. You're looking at this and saying maybe he shouldn't run.
I think there's a great deal of concern with the Republicans. Whenever you start out a campaign by touting your personal polygraph test, you have a problem to start with. I mean,
which is what he did this week.
That's exactly what he did.
He came out with a polygraph test that said it cleared him.
Yes, that's what he said. And I mean, whenever you're explaining your actions, you're not campaigning, so he's going to have some issues. He is going to be a strong contender. He's a relentless campaigner. He will work tirelessly knocking on doors. He's a very likable person. Voters buy into him and talk to him and like him. He's likable. So I think that this is something where, yes, you're probably going to see more people get into this race. I don't know who, but I think you'll see that happen. And I also think that the voters really need to pay attention, because it's up to them now to make sure that we get a person with integrity and strength in that office.
Joe, what do you think about Jim Norman getting into the county commission race?
I wouldn't put it past him to get it. I mean, it depends on the strategy he uses for getting elected. You can use the Marion Barry strategy. I mean, here's a guy got caught on tape smoking crack. So how does he get reelected? You know, they after me. You know, the government, it's a conspiracy. I'm a victim. And the people bought into it. Yeah. Or the Mark Sanford strategy. Now, this is a guy, you know, governor of South Carolina, who got caught, you know, said he was hiking the Appalachian Trail, but he was down in South America chasing tail. Really. So, but he leaves office in disgrace. He then runs for Congress, and their strategy is not, he's a nice guy, a great guy, but if you don't elect him, then the Democrats might take Congress back, and then Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi got mentioned in his campaign more than his opponent. So, depends on the strategy. He can definitely get elected again.
Barry, Jim Norman says, look, I wasn't convicted of anything. He says he's cleared. You know, that there were no charges ever filed against Jim Norman in regard to this case.
No criminal charges. My mama told me a half lie, or half a truth, it's a full lie. He was charged by the Ethics Commission, and he pled guilty. He admitted guilt, and then they sent it to the Senate for punishment, because that's the way our system works. And he then dropped out of the Senate race, and then they closed the hearing. So he never got punished. But he admitted guilt on March 30th of 2012. So now 3 years go by, and he wants us to forget that. He wants us to forget that when he bought the house that he didn't know about, he was at the closing with his wife, and he signed the closing check. He wants us to know that half of his net worth was in this house, and he forgot it on his. But he also wants us to forget that Ralph Hughes gave $100,000 or more a year to the Salvation Army, and that he had a job that nobody knows what he did at the Salvation Army, and he got a car, and he also got a car allowance. So it goes on and on and on. The big winners are Pat Kemp, Brian Willis, and Tom Scott, the Democrats who are running for the county commission against him. Pat Kemp lost by half a point in a Republican wave cycle off year to Al Higginbotham. One of the three of those, which are all great candidates, are going to beat the tar out of Jim Norman.
Except if you're a Republican and you've got Pat Kemp and Jim Norman, aren't you going to hold your nose and vote for Jim Norman, who shares your values, rather than Pat Kemp, who doesn't?
Well, the Republicans will vote, but Hillsborough County in a presidential cycle is about a +3 county for the Democrat, and there's not going to be any erosion. I don't see any crossover from independents or Democrats to Jim Norman.
And correct me, is this a countywide seat?
Countywide
Yes,
seat.
Okay, that makes a difference too.
Yes, it is.
Brendan, one last question. In every story so far about this race, the House in Arkansas has been mentioned. The race, though, is November 2016, provided that Norman gets through the primary. How many more months of the mention of the House in Arkansas are there in news coverage, or does that continue right up until the day that the race is decided?
I think it's going to be sort of his second line. Jim Norman, recipient of a $500,000 house in Arkansas. But I think it's going to be up to whoever his opponent is, and how aggressively they want to beat that drum. You're the political consultant expert, and I don't know if you would urge them to really stress that or be more substantive.
I'll probably be working for one of those three Democrats, and there's going to be a lot of mailers going out with pictures of him by the pool in Arkansas at a house he didn't know he owned.
Okay. Well, Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn and the Tampa City Council are locked in a power struggle over creating a board to review citizens' complaints against the police. The mayor announced last week that he plans to create a review board and appoint most of the board members himself. Some of the Tampa City Council members say that's too much power in the mayor's hands and that such a review panel would not be independent or objective. This week, the Tampa City Council heard from dozens of residents who called on the council to create an independent citizens review commission. So, Joe, this is really a power struggle between the mayor and the city council. Who has the right to set up a board? And they've got legal opinions on both sides saying the mayor says he's got the right to do it, and the council has its own legal opinion and says it has the right to do it.
Well, it's kind of like the old African proverb, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. Right. You know, people have been forgotten in all this. I really don't know, to be honest about it. You know, some lawyer will have to settle that out, or their lawyers. Each side has a lawyer. I didn't know that either. That's really weird. You know, but I was just in Cleveland, Ohio last week, and I spent about a week there. And they have a citizens review board. It's in the city charter. Yet, the Justice Department, which investigated the police department right after a shooting of a 12-year-old boy with a BB gun or something. Anyway, it caused a lot of national outrage. They found out that the board didn't do nothing. That, since 2012, they had made and they got power to subpoena and everything else. So I say all that to say, eventually the mayor and the city council will straighten things out, as they always do. But police boards are not panaceas for solving all the problems.
So not necessarily a good idea in your mind?
I wouldn't say it's not a good idea. It depends on what powers it's given and how they act, or react in some cases to incidents.
Brendan, for as long as I've been paying attention to Tampa City Council, there has been conflict in Tampa over who has the most power. The City Council always feels like they're being dissed by the mayor. And I've heard this for years under various administrations.
Yeah, Bob Buckhorn, he is a pugnacious guy, or he can be. But, I don't think we'd be talking about a police advisory board if not for two things. One was the death of Arthur Green, and he was an active member of the community, a diabetic who had an episode in his car. Tampa police, instead of taking him to the hospital, thought he was being uncooperative. They took him to jail, and he died. His wife is Lena Young Green, and she is a force. She is, my understanding, suing the city. The other thing is the bicycling. The African-American bicyclists, almost exclusively the recipients of tickets. The response by the city and the police department and the mayor's office was pretty muted on both those things. And I think the fact that they maybe didn't handle that with as much sensitivity as they could have, that's what has sort of precipitated the call for this review board in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So the mayor says that he has the legal authority to do this. What do you think?
That's up for the city attorney to decide ultimately. He may be right, but that doesn't mean that the city council doesn't have the right and the authority to form their own. So really, we've got two advisory boards. I understand the mayor's in Ireland right now, right. So he's going to have to come back and deal with this in some sense, but it's sort of dueling boards.
April, what do you think?
Well, you're right. In past administrations, there's been this conflict between the mayor and the city council because the city charter in Tampa creates a strong mayor government. And that causes some issues at times. That's why there's two attorneys, because in past years when they've had this type of a conflict, the council decided that they needed their own representation. And so the city attorney is representing the mayor in this, and then the council attorney is representing the council in this, and so they each have a different opinion that they've provided that says that the mayor can do it or the council can do it. But these are two very experienced government lawyers that know what they're doing. So I think we're just going to see how it plays out. But surely they'll come to a compromise and do something that's good for the community in the end.
And I've had Tampa City Council members come to me and say they don't want to just be a rubber stamp for the mayor, even mayors that they normally would agree with. But they feel like they're, in some cases, the mayor has all the power and there's very little power for the city council. So now we're seeing the city council kind of exert itself and say, wait a minute, we want a little power.
Right. And that's typical in this city government. You see that happening because of the way the charter is set up that gives the mayor so much power versus the council having the power.
Mm-hmm. Barry, Joe said that these review boards are not a panacea. In St. Petersburg, they've had a review board for a while, along the lines of what the mayor, Bob Buckhorn, wants in Tampa, and it's functioned, I think, pretty well. There hasn't been much controversy attended to it.
I think more of the members over there are appointed by the city council. I think the problem over here, it looks reactive. The mayor is in charge of the police chief. He can hire and fire. They serve at his pleasure. And you had all these problems, not only with the ticketing of the bicyclists, but also these DUI stops that 3 high-profile attorneys just got disbarred for. And there was no reaction to that until John Fitzgibbons filed a letter to the Justice Department. So I think people are thinking that maybe this is kind of a cover-up. If he's appointing everybody to this commission, then they're going to be responsive to him instead of responsive to the public. I think that's why most of the city council people would like to appoint their own, so you get a broader selection of the community where people aren't aligned necessarily to him. So, but the problem with what he set up is not independent. They can't hold hearings before it's closed, and they don't have any subpoena power. So maybe he needs to get with the city council and they need to do that, and if they need to get subpoena power, they may have to have the legislature pass a special bill for him. But this is kind of just window dressing, I think.
What's your sense? Is this a negotiating position by the mayor, or is this hard and fast the way he wants it to be when it finally emerges?
I think this is how he wants it to be, but I think he's going to end up negotiating because it's not going to go away.
Because, you know, this week at the Tampa City Council, about 40 people from the community spoke and said that, you know, some people had stories about how they felt that they had been mistreated by the police, and others were community leaders who said, you know, we really ought to get this done. There seems to be a lot of energy at the grassroots level to get a police citizens review committee established.
Absolutely, and I come back to this notion of how officials react to these incidents. It was always conventional wisdom among doctors to never admit any wrongdoing, so you're not sued for malpractice. And if you are, you know, it's going to strengthen your case if you didn't say that you did anything wrong. They did research and they found out doctors who apologized to patients when they clearly made a mistake, the rate of suing was a fraction of it was. People sue, people take action when they feel disrespected, when they don't feel apologized to, when they feel they deserve that. So, you know, I think that's sort of the important instructional thing about this whole thing is it's maybe a time for the city and the police department and the mayor's office and the city council to think about, you know, the root cause of what gave rise to this discontent and this feeling that we need in a police advisory board.
Because the optics at the very least are bad. If you're riding a $4,000 Cannondale, which I did as a test down Bayshore, on
You're talking about bicycle.
bicycle, nobody stops you. I took my hands off the handlebars. Nobody stopped me. It was
No
dust.
helmet?
What?
Helmet?
No helmet.
Yeah.
And why didn't anybody ask me, do you have a receipt for that, Mr. Edwards? But if I had done the same thing in West Tampa, I probably would have been pulled over.
You were an African American.
If I was an African American. So the optics of the very least are
Something
very
to ask
bad.
too about those bicycle tickets. Would that have happened? Would a review board have caught that? It took some, you know, newspaper reporters who are used to, you know, getting into things and checking this, checking that. You know, would a board be able to do that? So that's something else to think about too.
All right. Well, after Governor Rick Scott ordered an investigation of all Planned Parenthood clinics in Florida, investigators found that there was no mishandling of fetal tissue at any of the clinics. And according to Politico, when a press release was issued about the investigation, that detail was removed. Politico reports the governor's office also added a line that some doctors who worked at the clinics would be referred to the Board of Medicine for possible disciplinary action. It's unclear whether any doctors actually face disciplinary action. Neither side is talking. But Planned Parenthood does say that by removing the part clearing Planned Parenthood of any wrongdoing regarding fetal tissue, the governor is playing politics with women's health. April, is the governor playing politics with women's health?
I sure hope not. I think the whole Planned Parenthood thing is, it's an interesting concept because they released all these videos to begin with of undercover organization that went in and interviewed Planned Parenthood. And I don't know if you've seen any of these videos, but they're very disturbing, extremely disturbing. And if they are actually doing what they talked about doing during those videos, which is preserving organs that can be used for medical research, it's extremely troubling, and there's a lot of tax money that's supporting Planned Parenthood. So across the country, what we've seen are governors calling for investigations of all the Planned Parenthoods. Now, from what I read on Politico, it to me was confusing at first because it said that they found no wrongdoing, yet they were going to refer doctors for disciplinary action. So why is there disciplinary action if there's no wrongdoing? So I'm not sure we have the whole picture here. They did say that there were 3 clinics that were performing unlicensed abortions, and they were not following their own guidelines and doing it the way they had it set up and established to do it. So I think the whole thing revolves around the fact that the abortion issue is such a volatile political issue, and people use that to incite emotion in voters and to cause more angst and anxiety and action so that they can get them to do other things. It's not necessarily the goal to destroy Planned Parenthood, but the goal is to motivate people to do other things.
And Barry, to the point of whether or not Planned Parenthood committed any wrongdoing in the state of Florida, what's your take?
The original report clears them. The videos, which are disturbing, were highly edited. And when you can cut and paste, you can make things out of context, which is what happened. And the doctors that they wanted to refer for the unlicensed abortions, you know, they started to get into the nuance of when does the second trimester begin and things like that. And they were all cleared because on the standards that the state has used up to this point, the clinics were using the state standard. So all of these charges were, I think, done in a very political way. And the governor is here again when he was asked, did he fire the FDLE person, he said no. He said the cabinet members agreed. They said no. So we just see a constant pattern of him not being truthful. And doing his job. Where is he? He's opening up Wawa's in Palm Beach, and he's not addressing this. He wasn't involved with the redistricting, where he's a signatory on the congressional redistricting. Why are we having to waste money? Why doesn't he do his job and quit making politics out of everything?
I have to say one thing about those videos, because I watched several of them, and even if they are cut and pasted, the discussions that they had that were pasted in there were very disturbing, and the things that they were talking about, in my opinion, were very wrong.
And I do think, right, the people on the Planned Parenthood side of the argument of the pro-choice need to be mindful that this is a very sensitive issue. And I think there's been a lack of sensitivity on a lot of them on this side. And I think both sides need to cool the rhetoric down, see where the real reality is, and follow the law.
And that's not going to happen. The rhetoric is going to continue. It's going to incite riots. People are going to get upset about it. That's what they're trying to do, is to get people emotionally charged before an election. It's part of the big game plan. It's just... In my opinion, we need to go back to less government. Just get government out of the doctor's offices and people's lives and people's bodies. So.
All right. Well, Vice President Joe Biden made several appearances in South Florida this week, followed by a very large number of reporters. They were there looking for any indication that the VP was planning to challenge Hillary Clinton for the presidential nomination. Biden presented himself as a natural heir to President Obama's policies. He defended the nuclear control agreement with Iran during a meeting with Jewish leaders, and he talked up ways to expand the middle class and make college more affordable. So, Barry, is this a sign that Hillary Clinton's in trouble?
Hillary Clinton is not in trouble. And I want to start with all these people that are on the draft Biden side and say they can't talk to Biden because of the super PAC rules. That's wrong. Jeb Bush was able to go to events and talk to Mike Murphy until he filed for election. So this shows you that Biden, if he was really interested, would be coordinating with all these strategists that are helping the draft Biden effort. But they're not, because he's not. That's number one. Two, he has about 60 days to make the decision, because he's got to start getting on the ballot in these states, or there's not going to be enough delegates to go around. 30 years ago, 60% or so of the delegates were superdelegates, so the party bosses chose. Well, now this year is only, I think, going to be about 20% of the delegates are going to be superdelegates. And they're with Hillary this time. In 2008, they were with Obama. They're not. They're with her. Her lead in the polls is larger than any frontrunner ever for the Democratic Party, and her lead is much higher than it was in 2008. And you know, they talk about all these scandals with Hillary with the Benghazi, which is, you know, every committee has said there wasn't anything there, even Republicans like Darrell Issa. But let's look at these emails. Nobody thought Hillary was a squeaky clean Pollyanna. You know what you're getting, and we like her if you're a Democrat because she's passionate and an aggressive leader. And so we're going to forgive some things.
Brendan, let me bring you in this. Is Hillary Clinton in trouble, and is this a sign that she's in trouble?
Well, this sort of water torture of these emails getting released, and it's going to be months before they all come out. There's only been about a quarter of them released now, so we don't know what is going to come out of these. It's hard to know, and I think Joe Biden is keeping his presidential powder dry, so to speak. I bet he wishes he had more than 60 days to make this decision, because you know, if he wanted to recuse himself, he would have done it by now. So I think he's keeping it as an option should Hillary Clinton, you know, have some sort of revelation that is a disqualifier. But absent that, I agree with Barry that I think she is far and away the front runner and still in a strong position against any of the Republicans running.
She's raised $68 million in the bank. He's raised zero.
All right. And Joe, last word on this. Is Hillary in trouble? Is this a sign that she's in trouble?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Well, before we go, what other news story should we be paying attention to? Brendan, let's start with you. Your other big story.
Yeah, St. Pete Mayor Rick Kreisman just came back from Cuba. Excited about the potential of having a Cuban consulate in St. Petersburg. He actually talked to officials there about that. But Tampa, as we all know, is the historic sister city of Havana. It's got those historic ties. And there's a school of thought that says that Bob Buckhorn's sort of anti-normalization stance, he's very critical of the relaxing of the embargo, may have scotched the deal for Tampa, even if we wanted it. So I just can't imagine if St. Pete gets a Cuban consulate instead of Tampa, it's going to be awkward.
All right. Barry, your other big story.
Next Thursday, September 10th, the Poynter Institute is having the leading Hispanic television journalist in the country, Ana Navarro, come to speak in their lecture series, and it's going to be a great opportunity. It shows that St. Pete is open and welcome to Hispanics, and if you want to come, go to poynter.org.
It's going to be a big day because of the controversy over Donald Trump and the immigration question.
Absolutely. And she's a very close friend, obviously, with Jeb Bush.
All right.
And
April,
she's recently on The View.
All right. April, your other big story.
Okay, I have been working with an organization out in South Hillsborough County called the Good Samaritan Mission, and they are putting together a farmers market in South Hillsborough County that's going to start the 1st of October. It will be the first and third Thursday of every month from 3 to 7 p.m. It's designed to benefit their clients, to teach them how to be entrepreneurs and to make money, and it's also designed to benefit the mission, obviously. But it's very exciting, and people in South County should come out and try it out.
What road is the
It's on
mission?
Balm My Mama Road.
All right.
In Balm.
All right. Joe, your other big story.
Following this show, if you're watching on Friday, is American Masters on Althea Gibson, who I consider one of the most underrated, underappreciated athletes in the history of this nation. I mean, we all know about the Williams sisters in tennis. Long before they were even born, or their father was probably even born, Althea Gibson was winning Grand Slams against some insurmountable odds. Mm-hmm. So I like everybody, just if you're watching it, just stay here. Don't touch that dial. Nobody knows what a dial is. Don't touch the remote.
Don't touch the clicker.
Yeah.
All right. Althea Gibson breaking the color, Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you all for a great show, and thank you for watching Florida This Week. We want to hear from you. You can write us at ftw@wedu.org or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. And you can watch the show online on the wedu.org website beginning Monday morning. We'll see you next Friday night at 8:30 and Sunday afternoon at 12:30. And from all of us here at WEDU, have a happy Labor Day.
Florida This Week is a production of WEDU, who is solely responsible for its content.